So today we're going to be checking out Lattafa Khamrah, which has come onto the market. It's been getting a ton of hype because it smells like a significantly more expensive fragrance from a really highly respected niche house from Kilian, and this is Angel's Share. So just bottle-wise, I mean, you could see there are some similarities. Other than the shape, I mean, they are very close. Both bottles have these kind of marks that go off to the side, these indentations in the glass. This one has the same, except they stick out instead of push in, which is kind of a unique feature. So kind of interesting. I mean, you can tell what they were going for here. And I'm going to break this one down for you. Again, it's a scent that's been getting a ton of hype, and so when it comes in stock, it goes out of stock quickly. So I will link it down below. Hopefully by the time I'm posting this, it's in stock, but it's kind of hard to time it anyway because, well, I could post the video and it could go out of stock within a couple hours, and then everyone else is left not being able to get it. It's one of those deals where it's kind of a lose-lose situation. Regardless, I got to get the review out sometime, so here it is. This will help you in the future to pick this one up later on down the road if it's not available right now. I'm going to go over how similar they are to each other. Personally, I think they're very close. This one to Angel's Share, that is, but I do think there are also some key differences as well, and we'll dive into those in a second. Well, I think most importantly, we should start off with focusing on the scent of this one. So I will be upfront and say that this is an incredibly sweet fragrance. One differentiating factor right off the initial spray between the two is that the Lattafa is significantly more piercingly sweet off the opening compared to Kilian Angel's Share. Just wanted to throw that out there. Both are very sweet, gourmand, and boozy fragrances. So regardless of which one you're going after here, you got to make sure that you're into this type of DNA first. I see it all too often, and it always kind of makes me laugh. You look at some reviews and people say it's way too sweet and way too cloying, and it just kind of makes you wonder what fragrances they wear day to day. Probably your typical freshies and aquatics and blues, which is nothing wrong with those. I love freshies and aquatics and blues, but you guys have to exercise a little bit of due diligence and, dare I say, common sense here. Just kind of be aware of what you're getting yourself into. Now with the Kilian, it's even more of a big deal because if you're going for a blind buy, you're going to be paying like $90 for that or something like that at retail, discounted a bit less. So you really got to be careful there. Sample it first. But when this one usually comes up for around $30, $35, maybe even a bit less than that, at that point it's a little bit more of an easier blind buy to make. So like I said, when you first spray this one on, immediate sweetness, like it just completely assaults your nose with a bunch of booze and vanilla and like chocolatey accords and all of that stuff. So we'll take a look at the full note breakdown for this one. We have cinnamon, nutmeg, and bergamot up top. We have dates, praline, tuberose, and mahonial in the mid, which I'll be honest, it looks like it's a floral. Not really sure what it is otherwise. In the base, we have vanilla, tonka bean, myrrh, benzoin, akagala wood, and amber wood. So out of those notes, immediately you're going to get, again, the vanilla. You're going to get a nice, warm, spicy cinnamon accord, tonka bean. The praline is kind of really the star of the show here with this one. It's an overwhelmingly chocolatey sweet accord. One thing that's interesting here is with this note breakdown, they don't list off any boozy notes. Like in the Kilian, they do have rum in there, I believe. This one, not so much. There definitely is a booziness. It's not in the same caliber as the Kilian, which is another differentiating factor. To me, it's more so like a bourbon vanilla is kind of how I would describe this one. Just a very sweet, juicy, bourbony vanilla accord with some praline really coming in strong. And then some of the florals kind of providing it a little bit of a counterbalance to somewhat keep it on track. Again, like I mentioned in the very beginning, still very much a sweetness forward scent. But the florals do a really nice job of kind of bringing it back down to earth just a little bit. Now, the further into the dry down you get, the better this one gets. That's when some of the myrrh starts to come through, some of the tonka bean, and you lose some of that piercing sweetness that you get off the opening. And personally, the dry down is my favorite part. I love the opening as well. I think it smells amazing. It's very captivating. It's very attention grabbing when you first spray this one on, whether it be up in the air or on your skin. I mean, it'll wake you up. But the dry down is so delicious and smooth and inviting and sexy, and that's really where you want to be. So I would encourage you in your testing phases of this one to get it into the dry down before you make any final judgments. After all, the dry down is what's going to be around the most, so you want to make sure you're cool with that part. So, again, all around, very close to the Killian, definitely heavily inspired. But honestly, Lattafa has some clones that are closer to other things. I'm not saying closer to Killian's Angel Share, but when you take a look at some of their other popular releases, they kind of get closer to what it is that they're going after. I don't know if that was intentional here with this one or not. I kind of think it's a really nice twist on the DNA. Still heavily similar, but with a few key differences that I did want to point out. Now, I also do want to make it very clear that those differences aren't a bad thing. In fact, that's actually kind of a good thing, because when you think about it, if you already have the Killian and maybe you want to pick something up to save money from wearing that one, you could get a clone and it's going to be very similar, right? But sometimes it's nice to be saving money, but also getting a bit of a different twist on that DNA, and that's what this one is. So ultimately, I think it's kind of cool that it separates itself a little bit and makes it a little bit different, and I like that about it. Now, we'll go ahead and talk about performance here on this one. I just want to double check our concentration. It's an eau de parfum, and longevity on my skin has been very impressive, especially at this price point, usually around 9 hours or so on average, which really I can't complain. And you would kind of come to expect that given the heavy just composition that this one has with all of the sweet notes, but at this price point, sometimes it's hit or miss. I will say Lattafa and some of these other clone brands have been on fire, and their scents all around, from performance to quality to uniqueness and closeness, have been top notch for the price. So I kind of did have expectations that it would do good, and it does. Projection is also relatively strong. I mean, that sweetness is very overpowering. It'll push out. You don't need a ton of sprays with this one. If you're just in a normal everyday environment, a handful, count on one hand probably is going to be good enough. 4, 5, and maybe for some people in the environment that may be too much. Now, if you wanted to go out to the bars, to parties, whatever, just walking down the streets in the wintertime, you can amp it up and do, significantly more sprays and get even better results there in terms of projection. But for everyday wear, it really doesn't take all that much. And again, when you factor in the cost, you're not going to really necessarily be burning through this one quick. And if you do, it's pretty easy to pick up again, as long as it's in stock. And a lot of times it is out of stock. You might have to wait around. My advice to you, if you like this one, maybe pick up an extra bottle every so often when it comes back in stock, just that way you have one on hand. Again, for gourmand lovers out there, you are going to have a heyday with this. You're going to think it's really solid for the price. And again, if you're coming from the fresher side of things, do be careful. I will say this would be the place to start, though. Don't dive headfirst into a blind buy of Killian's Angel Share, right? That wouldn't be really probably the smartest idea. And when you look at buying a sample of it, you could buy a sample of it, or you could buy this and it'll give you a general idea of what that smells like. Again, not exactly the same. If you want to know exactly what Angel's Share smells like, you're just going to have to buy that or sample it rather, preferably. But if you just want to kind of get into the similar ballpark, just kind of figure out if boozy gourmands are going to be for you, you can just pick up a full bottle of this for $30 or whatever, and a sample of the Killian isn't going to be too far off from that, at least a decent sized one that you can test, and then you'll kind of have an understanding of if it's going to be for you or not. Obviously, I do have the Killian, think it's fantastic, really like it, but I'm also happy to have this one. There isn't too much redundancy given that there are some differences, and it's a nice little way to where I don't have to burn through my other one or my more expensive version. A lot of times I'll be showering in the evening, maybe in the daytime, middle day, maybe in the morning. It just depends. This is something I could throw on a few hours before I take a shower if I want a nice gourmand, knowing that's going to get washed off and I'm not going to feel like I'm wasting a bunch of money. Alrighty guys, that's going to do it for me. Lattafa Khamrah, worth the hype? I definitely think so for certain individuals out there. You got to be into this type of DNA, and if you are, this is a gold mine of a scent. If not, well then of course it's probably not going to be worth the hype for you. I will link it down below. If it's not in stock now, subscribe because it will be at some point. And I post on my community tab deals every day, all day long. When rare stuff like this comes in stock, I post about it. And if you want to get those deals via email, so maybe you don't miss out, you can use the link down below and sign up for that as well. Appreciate your guys' support. Thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you tomorrow with another one. Take care.